Yeah, so you got a polyphonic step sequencer. You have ratchet count per step, which is kind of a fun thing. Let's put up there. So ratcheting is like a certain repetition of notes per step. But what I was getting at is that you can also record any parameter tweaks that you want per step pretty much. So you go to the modulations page of the step sequencer, and there's a step mod button. Then if step mod is active, any knobs that you tweak will be recorded to the sequence. And you can control the amount of that. You can assign, for example, the mod wheel to how much parameter modulation you have per step and fade it in. Let's see, I can do that here. Yeah, the modulation I just recorded. All right, maybe it'd be better to start with a simpler sequence. So I will do that right quickly. Here we are. Start with sequence. So that's basically just C.
You have to come back for the synth jam, bring it on jam night.
Yes.
Unless it's 6.
Yeah, it's basically just keep turning knobs and it'll keep adding them. Again, I think you get about 20 lanes of modulation per layer. Yep. So yeah, you can. Again, that was a little bit random and noodly, but if you're like, oh, on this beat, I really want this parameter to change, you can dial it in with surgical precision, so that just on that beat, you get an offset to the parameter that you want in the direction that you want, and that gets saved with the sequence as well. Sequences can also be saved and loaded independently of the presets that they're in. A sequence, if you create a preset and you write a sequence and you save the preset, it saves that sequence, but you can also save the sequence by itself and load it into other presets, and have a whole library of sequences. There's not a playlist mode yet for them, but there's a design for a playlist mode. That's one of those features that's sort of like, we couldn't get it into 1.0.0, but it's there, it's defined, it'll be there. Yeah, exactly.
In the audio oscillators, you mentioned triangle saw and
Pulse, yeah.
But it's not signed. Is sign not there?
Correct. Sine is not there, but if you start with a triangle wave, it does not take very much filtering to get something that does the job of a sine. But yeah, the basic wave. Yeah, there's sinusoids are one of those. It's like the simplest waveform, but it's not the simplest one to create electronically in an oscillator.
It's been a problem for 15 years.
Yeah. So you'll find a lot of instruments like that, ones that do have sines.
We should have put some tubes in there.
Yeah, we should. That would have really helped with the weight and the heat and the cost.
No, just run it at 12 volts.
We wanted to keep his job.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about main station.
Yeah.
With all this going on, with the tri-temporality, publicity, just it's all been done for us. We don't have any screens, or we can govern it, or we need to govern some part of the game.
Not too much. If there's any complaints with respect to that, I would say it's mostly that it's too clean. That it's like it's not, on most mono synths, if you turn up, if you dime all the gain knobs, it gets really dirty and growly and overloaded, which is generally a good thing. But we decided that times 16 voices, having the headroom to mix that was just like, that was.
So you prohibited from design that?
We just kept it a little bit on the reasonable side of things.
Well, with all the resident needs too that are available.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so there's very, very few places in the signal chain where you can get bad clipping. There are places where you can get good saturation, and definitely, like, if you turn up all the mixer knobs all the way up, you're hitting the filters hard enough that they will saturate, and you'll get some nice harmonic distortion happening. But it's not brutal. And it was designed, there's enough headroom in the final mix that you can nail 16 voices with, 5 sound sources, and it won't make bad clips. So it's
Well, bravo. That's not easy.
it was definitely not easy, and there was a real balancing act between allowing that much headroom and still having a good signal to noise ratio. Like, if you're playing, and it is like, it's not, it is a lot of voices and analog mixed together. If you're playing just a single triangle oscillator with the filter turned down dark, like, that's really quiet relative to the loudest possible sound that it can make. And so it's closer to the noise floor. And that's, we had to try to strike that balance. And we sort of erred on the side of you can create a really big sound and nail a really big chord and it's still going to sound good. We erred on that side versus getting a really hot signal out of a single oscillator or a single voice.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's okay. And if you do want to do single oscillator, single voice sounds, number one, there's a few things that we can do in the background to manage how many voices are turned on and blah blah blah. We're working on that. And the other thing is, that's where those inserts come in. You can send that single oscillator sound out at direct output and, through your favorite drive pedal or something like that. And that works really well.
Last question that I have is the wheels. 2 wheels and XY.
Yeah, 2 wheels, XY pad with pressure.
Yeah.
And the XY pad, you got several options for it. It can either be centered, like unipolar or bipolar. Basically, 0 can be at the center and you can go negative or positive, or 0 can be in the lower left corner and you can just go positive X, positive Y.
Yeah.
And it also has a hold on or off, so it can latch the position that you last touched or not.
Yeah. So you could play rhythmically.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You can dance around on it like that.
You totally can do that. I don't know if there's like a really good example preset here. There probably is. Not the one I was going for, although I don't know if the one I was going for is any better. Oh, wait, I do know a good one. Let me find it. Let's see.
Is pressure assignable to any destination?
Yes, it is.
6 watts on the.
Yes, it sends and receives MIDI CCs. So it's automatable in that sense. As far as recording it into the sequencer, I don't think you can exactly do that, but it's just a controller, so all you can do is map it to parameters, and the parameters you can automate in the sequencer. So the only real thing you'd be gaining is just using that as your input device. Now it would be cool to be able to record moves on that and play them back, but not quite there.
How many tracks in the sequence?
You get as many melody tracks as you have, well actually, I think technically there's like 99 tracks, but you can only play back as many as you have hardware voices. On the modulation side, I think you get 20 lanes of parameter modulation per sequence. I think so, yeah. Yeah, and again, that's because the total capacity, we had to make sure that you could do that times 3. So there's 60 mod matrix slots and 60 parameter, sequence slots per preset, and those are divided amongst the 3 timbres that you can have. I thought about, can we make that dynamic if you only have a single layered sound? Can it have 60 modulations? We're not quite there yet, because then the other thing is you can, so when you save a preset, that's up to 3 different timbres. You can also browse through the presets, grab a timbre from anywhere and load it into any other preset, so you can mix and match. And that's where my clever idea, like, oh, hey, I've only got 1 layer, it's got 60 modulations, that's awesome, but what if you drag that and drop it into another preset that already has a bunch of modulations on another sound? Then you need your CPU meter again that we were talking about earlier. Yeah, or your VU meter.
Well, the third timbre, was that the big, it seems like that's the big, in a way, when I think of this, that's the 11 in the keyboard world.
Oh, right,
Because
yeah.
there's so many bitimbre things, and then to go for the third, but it has a lot of repercussions in everywhere.
And not only that, neither 8 nor 16 is divisible evenly by 3.
That's right.
Take that! Ha ha ha!
Hence the 1.
Oh, that's right, that's the 1 left over, yeah. I like that one.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, for jamming, and you're matching somebody's rhythm. You don't want to set up.
That's with your two filters, different frequency,
Yeah.
as you described.
Yeah, exactly right. You get those kind of vocal things going on. And also, I put a little bit of, there's actually the gate on the pad is gating of the vibrato LFO.
Can you sync the echo to that?
Yeah, I could do. Let me see. So the echo is probably not, let's see. That's interesting. Where's that echo even coming from? I mean, there's obviously an echo. I hear it.
It's been on for the last 20 minutes.
All right, that may be an external echo. Like, Jamie, do you have an echo on me by chance?
No, you're just going right through that model. You're not even going
No built-in effects on your board here?
Yeah.
Okay, oh, that's interesting.
You got them all turned off and it's still there.
The effects are all turned off here. And, yep, there sure is an echo.
We're drawing forward.
You know what? Hold on a second.
Turn it off, turn it back on.
Well,
Gone.
it's internal. All right. That is very interesting. All right. Does the unit preset have an echo? I don't think it did.
No, it doesn't.
No, it does. All right. There's a rogue echo. There is an echo in here. That's really interesting. Can't account for it. All right.
Headphones.
Yeah. Huh. All right. Well, that'll be fixed in firmware version 1.0.3. Coming soon. Yep. Literally have never heard it do that before. That's very
Two
interesting.
already out?
It's coming out in the morning.
So all the work's been done.
Yep. We just approved it at the end of the day today. I It's all locked and loaded and ready to be like 9 a.m. tomorrow. 1.0.2 will be out.
Can you reveal anything about it?
Oh, sure. It's the main thing that it does is it lets the fans run more quietly than they do by default because people freaked out about the fact that this has cooling fans in it and could not abide it and could not believe that such an expensive synthesizer could dare ever have a fan that they could hear in their studio. And I'm a little bit like, I get it. And you know, people paid a chunk of money for this thing. They want it to be perfect. They want a quiet studio environment that only has sounds in it that they intend to be there. Like, I totally get that. I'm just amazed that, like, you know, the week that this thing shipped, there were, you know, a dozen, 20 posts about how it sounded and like 275 posts about the damn fan noise online. And I'm just like,
Were they calling that hovercraft?
oh, everything you can think of. They pull out all the stops. This is the internet, man. They, you know, when people dogpile on something, they get really creative and invested and enthused.
So you guys are a big target.
Yeah. I really like, I care about each and every person that pays my bills and buys my food. And like, I appreciate their point of view, and I get that they don't like fan noise. It's cool. It took, you know, when we initially shipped this thing, we were conservative. You know, I was mentioning there's a lot of DACs in here. There's a lot of, you know, I forget how many watts this thing dissipates, but it's like doing a lot of work and it generates a lot of heat. And so there's a row of fans along the mid-rail here, sucks in cool air through the keys, exhausts hot air out the back, blows across all the voice cards. Cool, that's all fine. But we were conservative with how cool we were keeping it and how fast we were running the fans, and therefore how audible they are. We also designed this thing in a noisy ass factory where you can't, it's like, you don't necessarily hear little quiet sounds in the background that would annoy somebody that was in their treated studio. So long story short, we've got a bunch of feedback saying we're not cool with the level of audibility of the fans, and so we rejiggered the temperature control system, you know, lowered the duty cycle of the fans, let them run, you know, slower and therefore more quietly, you know, constantly in a way that basically manages heat in a way that's safe and healthy and fine for the instrument at, you know, many dB lower volume. So that was the really the main thing in this release was, you know, there were just enough people that were saying, I'm going to return this to my dealer if you don't do something about the fans.
Wow.
So yeah, they were not fooling, man.
And none of these people have laptops or desktops or.
Yeah, that's not. I'm not even gonna get into it. That's, you know.
It's an analog synthesizer.
What you need
With
to
a
do-
computer in it.
Yeah, you need to tell them these are extra oscillators. That's
The
what-
physical oscillator.
I told you, man. They went all
Fan is an
in.
oscillator.
Yeah.
Make them track the keyboard, you know.
Oh
It's a
sure.
music
We'll use it as a modulation source. They covered all the bases
It's
already.
a spin it.
Yeah.
Okay, but back to the question.
Yeah.
If, because fans, is there any filtration, or you should be pulling a bunch of dust inside that eventually will just build up and it has to get cleaned? Like, is there any protection against that?
Some.
Positive case pressure?
I mean, it's not got HEPA filters in it or anything.
Well, right, but I'm just saying, build up over
Does it
time.
look like a PS4 after 6 months?
I think that depends. I wouldn't take it to Burning Man. We'll see. I don't, you know, it's all environmentally dependent. I don't anticipate that, like, it's going to look like the inside of a PC, especially if we're running the fans at a lower velocity. Then they're going to suck proportionally less crud into them per unit time. We'll see. But just to quickly wrap up about the firmware, so there's a new fan control mode that's quieter, and there will be much rejoicing, I hope, yay. The other thing is that the noise floor that I alluded to earlier, like, there are some folks out there that wanted to see that being better than it is, and so we did some sort of dynamic background noise management. And then there were a few just legitimate bug fixes that, off the top of my head, I don't remember what they are, but so yeah, 2 new features related to just how polite